What's up everyone, I'm Gushy and welcome to RPG Labs. In this video I'm going to be going over some incantations that you have to pick up, as some of these provide a very different playstyle and are pretty unique for any faith build. Before we get into it, if you enjoyed this video, definitely check out our Elden Ring playlist, as we have a ton of guides like this, some class builds, and breakdowns of game mechanics to help you master Elden Ring. So to start things off, we have a couple of incantations that really help support a stealth playstyle. In Elden Ring, we already have some stealth mechanics, but with these incantations, we can really go all out on a stealth build with these incantations if we wanted to. So the first incantation I want to go over is called Assassin's Approach. This has a really low FP cost at 12 and only requires 10 faith and will silence your footstep, reduce fall damage and sound. This lasts a decent amount of time at 20 seconds. And you can tell that this is in effect by your muted footsteps, as well as a buff icon on the top left hand side under your stamina bar. While going for a stealth playstyle, this is always the opener to traverse the map and find enemies that I can pick off. Of course, when we find an enemy, we are free to backstab them as they won't be able to hear you. So with this incantation, we can definitely get the drop on enemies and get a big burst of damage. Now this does work for all movement types, so running, jumping, and rolling, all of these sounds are muted. Now once you backstab a couple of enemies, it's kind of inevitable that you will be spotted sometime. And this is where our second incantation comes in handy. Once we get spotted and enemies are aggroed, we can use our next incantation called Darkness to blind enemies and conceal yourself again. You can then use this moment to get another backstab or disengage from the fight, so you could start your stealth engagement all over again. Darkness does have a little bit of a higher FP cost at 26 and requires 18 faith, but it is a really powerful tool if you're really trying to get out of a sticky situation. Now this Darkness incantation doesn't last that long at around 8 seconds, so you really do have to make that choice of either getting another crit in or disengaging, as you don't have much time. And so some of you might be thinking, does this work on bosses? Because this will be a kind of crazy cheese if this does. But unfortunately, it does not. However, on any other enemy, you can throw it down and basically stun them for a couple seconds. Just good luck getting close and casting it in time without getting hit. If you are interested in using this, I think the ideal way of using it is more of a zoning tool. So casting it at a distance and letting enemies come to you, where they just walk into the mist and blind themselves. Now both of these can be found from the same prayer book, which is really accessible early on into the game. The only thing you need is a couple stone sword keys and access to the main round table. From the round table, you want to go to the place where the armorer is, head down the stairs and to the left, and you'll see a gated off path. This is where you'll have to use your first stone sword key. In this first room, there'll be a crossbow. If you haven't picked it up already, go ahead and pick that up. But more importantly, there should be another door where you can again use another stone sword key, which in the next room you'll find the Assassin's Prayer Book. To learn this incantation, you could either go to Brother Corin, who's already at the round table. However, the place I am in the story, Brother Corin actually leaves the round table, so you can also go to the Church of Vows, where that turtle pope is, and you can give the Assassin's Prayer Book to him instead to learn. So along with these two incantations, there's one other which will help you with a stealth playstyle, and this third incantation is called Shadow Bait. This incantation is basically like other games where you can throw a rock or some kind of item to bait an enemy to a specific location. The bait does attract enemies from a decent range and requires the enemy to be completely unaware for this to take effect. I want to be completely honest with you guys, and I really can't recommend using this that much because the mechanics of this ability is kind of bad. First of all, it's really hard to throw the bait exactly where you want it to go. If you lock onto the target, it throws the bait right on the enemy, which kind of defeats the purpose of redirecting an enemy. And secondly, this does not work against enemies that are already on alert. As you can see in this clip, I'm throwing the bait right by this soldier over here. However, because he is alerted, he's still looking at my location. Of course, this also doesn't work if the enemies are already chasing you down. So there is a specific requirement for this incantation to work. Now, if you want this, it's also kind of a pain to get. You will have to have access to the main capital city, but the area that we want to be going is the sewers. This is actually an area where I had no idea about until I was trying to find this ability. So even if you aren't interested in this incantation, it might be a really cool area to explore. The closest site of grace you should already have is the Avenue balcony, which we'll be starting at. All you have to do is follow this path and you should be able to get there. So all you have to do is go down the hill, jump to this area where you'll find a well that you could go down, head to the gate to the left and keep going straight. Eventually you find these subterranean shunning grounds where there's some pretty hard hitting enemies. From here you want to go down and take the second opening to the right where this ladder is. From here you'll find a bunch of pipe systems where you'll have to dodge a bunch of enemies that pop out of nowhere. Just make your way to the right at the end of the pipes, up the stairs, and in the next room you'll find a body which has this incantation. One thing to keep in mind for all three of these stealth incantations is that you cannot use them while you're on horseback. It would be pretty useful if you can use darkness on horseback just to get more mobility, but it's not a big problem as you do need to be on foot to be getting those crits and backstabs. If you're going to be going full out on this playstyle, I definitely recommend a weapon that has a high critical attack power as you'll be getting more damage with those backstabs. To take this even a step further, going for that assassin playstyle, I also put on one of my favorite Ashes of War, Bloodhound Step. This lets you phase in and out and gives you a bunch of iframes and really makes you a ninja with this playstyle. Alright, the next set of incantations we'll be going over all revolve around the status effect Madness. Madness is the status effect that when inflicted, the target loses both FP and health. With his first incantation called Frenzied Burst, he can really become a sniper, picking off targets from a pretty long range. If you're using incantations, you probably already know about the Lightning Spear. Because it shoots in a straight line, it really is a solid option to pick off enemies at a distance. However, Frenzied Burst has an even longer range, really good tracking, and travels super fast to hit the target. The cast time is a bit slower, but because of that increased range you get, it is definitely worth it. If you are using this incantation, the one thing that I highly recommend using is the Radagon Icon Talisman, which will decrease your spell casting time. Now to get this, it's a little bit tricky. You have to go to Frenzied Flame Village, which is over here on the map, but is on top of the mountain, so you can't just go to the closest site of grace to get there. The way I found to get to this village is actually going to the main academy gate and then going around the mountain to this kind of secret entrance to the village. Now as you enter the village, you'll see this big eye in the sky, which if it does have line of sight on you, will constantly inflict madness upon you. So definitely keep a bunch of flasks on hand, or if you do have a consumable called Clarifying Boluses, it will alleviate your madness buildup. Once you get to the village, head up the hill over here, listen for that shimmering sound and the beetle that's rolling that ball. Kill that beetle and you should be able to get it. Now before you leave, definitely go to the top of the hill, as there is a weapon that will also build up madness, and there will be a site of grace so you don't have to go through that long journey just to get here again. Another madness incantation that's pretty easy to get is called Flame of Frenzy. This is a really good AoE attack which really goes well with this madness playstyle. Unlike Frenzied Burst, this is a shorter range ability as the reach isn't that far, but if in range does hit a really wide angle. One thing to keep in mind with all of these madness abilities is that as you use them, it also inflicts madness upon yourself. So you can't just be spamming these out like crazy, but honestly, if you're switching off with incantations and melee properly, you really should have no problem managing your madness meter. Again, this is in kind of a weird place to get to. The closest grace is over here at the Castle Morn Rampart. You're then going to head up the hill and on top of the mountain over here until you find the Kalu Baptismal Church. Right on the left hand side you'll find this incantation. Alright, the next unique incantation is called the Swarm of Flies. Now, unlike spellcasters which use intelligence-based skills, a lot of incantations don't have abilities with slow-moving projectiles which you can freely move while the projectile is still tracking the enemy. The only downside is that you will have to have 16 arcane to use this, but I think it's a really good tool as an opener. This is pretty useful to stun enemies while you're able to close distance and get some melee attacks in. It doesn't do a bunch of poise damage, but should work decently well against lower poise enemies. To get this, you will have to have access to the mausoleum over here. You can get here pretty early if you follow White Mask Vara's questline, but all you have to do is head to the site of grace over here. Just keep a lookout for the large stone pillar in the blood pool, and behind it to the left you'll find this incantation. Finally, the last incantation I want to go over is called Xzeks Decay. I don't know how to say that, but it's the Rot Dragon's ability. You can get this at the Cathedral of the Dragon Communion after defeating the Rot Dragon, and this is basically the upgraded version, which does more damage and more Rot buildup. The Rot Dragon is really close to the Dragon Communion, so once you defeat him, you should be able to buy it. Now, the one thing that makes this special and unique compared to all the other dragon spells is because of the Rot status effect. Once an enemy's Rot meter has filled up, they'll take damage over time, which lasts ridiculously long. This is extremely useful in PvP, and in some cases PvE against bosses. A little spoiler warning before we get into the Radahn fight. With this ability, it does make the Radahn fight super easy. Because the damage over time lasts so long, you can literally take down 3/4 of his health if you can get the hit off. This makes one of the hardest boss fights in the game ridiculously easy. Now, one really useful trait of using this ability is that you can actually use it in the air. This makes it a pretty safe option while casting, as it leaves you in the air, making it a little bit safer. The range is pretty decent, but it tracks extremely well, especially when locked onto targets, potentially giving you a very large radius. I think Rot is one of the stronger status effects in the game, and something I want to do more testing later on in the future. But with that, I hope you guys learned something in this video. If you did, please drop a like, and again, definitely check out our Elden Ring playlist. As always, thank you guys for watching, and hope to catch you in the next one.